Chapter 1731. This change first took effect following their return from the battle god hall. Tang Wulin had already mentally prepared himself for a scathing tirade from Ling Zichen. After all, he had deceived her about their mission. To his surprise, Ling Zichen left as soon as they returned, citing an urge to return to the Tang sect to study eternal heaven, and she hadn't aimed any criticism against him at all. Tang Wulin was in disbelief, but he certainly wasn't going to try and change her mind. He was happy that he wouldn't have to deal with her any longer. After that, he went into seclusion, and following his month-long seclusion, Ling Zichen returned. Upon meeting her again, Tang Wulin was shocked to discover that she seemed to have transformed into a brand new person. In the past, she had been cold and overbearing, but those facets of her persona had completely disappeared. She was now filled with boundless energy and contagious exuberance, and when Tang Wulin tried to ask her about what had happened in a tactful manner, she had told him that she had evolved. Through her study of eternal heaven, she was able to find solutions to many problems that had confounded her for years, and she had developed many new ideas. She said that she had gained more in the past month than her past 10 years of research combined. What frightened Tang Wuling the most was that she had thanked him. After that, Ling Zichen told him that she had developed a very detailed plan for the soul circuits of his suit of forward battle armor, and that it could be perfectly replicated onto his suit of battle armor once the forging process was complete. This suit of battle armor was going to be the first of its kind, a perfect incorporation of soul technology and martial soul. Furthermore, she had developed a way to decrease the difficulty of heavenly refinement. Tang Wuling decided to try this new method that she proposed, and just as she claimed, the difficulty of heavenly refinement really was decreased. After just a few days of experimentation, he was able to complete heavenly refinement on a 5-metal alloy for the first time. Thus, Ling Zichen had an excuse to join in on his forging. The combination of the rainbow lotus flame and Ling Zichen's soul technology gave Tang Wuling a glimmer of hope that 7-metal heavenly refinement was possible. During the past 2 months, he had been constantly working toward this goal, and if he managed to succeed, he would be able to begin forging his own suit of battle armor. At the same time, he would be able to purify his friend's suits of forward battle armor with the rainbow lotus flame to make them even more powerful. Overall, Shrek Academy and the Tang sect had benefited even more from his skills as a divine blacksmith than his power as a soul master. A divine blacksmith was simply far too important for a soul master organization. Even though Chen Zhenji had assisted them in securing eternal heaven, the battle god hall hadn't kicked up any fuss about this, and a huge factor behind this was the fact that Tang Wuling was a divine blacksmith, and he had promised to refine a suit of forward battle armor for the battle god hall. With one suit of forward battle armor promised, there was naturally a chance for a second one in the future. It was all just a matter of transactions of benefits. Tang Wuling took a glance at the warm smile on Ling Zichen's face, and he still felt rather unaccustomed to such a sight, even though she had already been like this for quite some time. Ling Zichen touched her own cheek and asked, "Why are you looking at me? Is there something wrong?" Tang Wuling hurriedly shook his head in response. "Not at all. I'll begin now." Ling Zichen said, "Go ahead, I'll help you observe." Even though she wasn't a soul master, her observation and calculation abilities as a scientist were unmatched. As it turned out, she had been very helpful with her analysis of data and Tang Wuling's forging process, proving that technology was also very important. Specks of pink light appeared all over Ling Zichen's body as she spoke, and she released her divine grade mecha. The shockwaves from heavenly refinement and elemental tribulations were far too powerful for a normal human like her to handle, so without her mecha, she would run the risk of being erased out of existence in a split second. Tang Wuling made his way over to the forging bench, and if one were to look closely, they would discover that the bench was shimmering with a faint layer of 4-colored light. If a high-grade blacksmith were to see this, they would definitely be stunned as the material used for this forging bench was also heavenly refined divine grade metal. Furthermore, it had undergone 4-color elemental tribulation, thereby imbuing it with the elements of water, fire, earth, and wind. This wasn't just an extravagant forging bench, it was a criminal waste of resources. Tang Wuling firmly believed that in order to do great things, one had to possess the best tools, and this was also something that he would leave behind for Shrek Academy. The materials used for this divine grade forging bench were actually all leftovers from his failed 7-metal heavenly refinements, and it was a necessity as a normal forging bench wouldn't be able to withstand his forging. He pulled out the 7 pieces of metal that he had prepared earlier before placing them onto the forging bench. Prior to confirming that he was able to complete 7-metal heavenly refinement, he wasn't going to take any chances on his own battle armor. He closed his eyes and gradually entered a tranquil state of mind. Only in the most quiet environment could he enter such a calm and focused state. Ling Zichen was standing not far away, silently appraising Tang Wuling. After having that epiphany in the battle god hall, she had undergone a huge transformation. The more she interacted with Tang Wuling, the more infatuated with him she became. Even she didn't know what type of feeling this was, but she was certain that this was the first time she had ever experienced something like this. The outcome wasn't important to her. What was important was that she was immersing herself fully into the experience and taking pleasure from it. Before she knew it, she discovered that he had become more important to her than anything else. This feeling seemed to have allowed her to completely open up her heart, resulting in a constant flow of inspiration that was benefiting her immensely in her research. Even though these improvements had all been made for the sake of helping him forge his suit of forward battle armor, she was still thoroughly enjoying herself. The experience of accompanying him every day during his forging sessions was a very blissful one for her. Only after a full 10 minutes had passed did Tang Wuling suddenly open his eyes, and in that instant, it was as if a ferocious beast had awakened, as if he had been a hibernating giant dragon before this moment. A faint dragon's roar rang out, and golden dragon patterns began to appear all around him. Tang Wuling raised his right hand and made a grabbing motion, upon which the lotus pattern on his right palm immediately lit up as a small rainbow flame appeared. The flame appeared to be very gentle and was giving off a sense of captivating beauty. On top of that, it didn't seem to be releasing any heat, but Tang Wuling was well aware that there was most likely no other flame on the entire Douluo continent that could match its heat. This was a divine grade flame. The rainbow flame rose up at his behest, then suddenly exploded into midair, splitting up into 7 different flames that fell upon the 7 pieces of uncommon metals. In the instant that the flames landed on the pieces of metal, a change immediately occurred. All of the pieces of metal were giving off their own unique gleam, and in that instant, that gleam was brightened to the extreme, as if the pieces of metals had been ignited, presenting an ethereal and beautiful sight in conjunction with the rainbow flames above them. Chapter 1732. The first time Tang Wuling used this rainbow lotus flame, he had almost destroyed his forging bench. The flame appeared to be very gentle, but it contained an enormous amount of energy. Tang Wuling had once enlisted Arahang's services as a lab rat, and even his invincible Vajra body was unable to withstand being scorched by this flame for long. Over a minute of exposure would result in substantial harm. That was a clear indication of just how fearsome this rainbow lotus flame was. Tang Wuling raised his hands, and a pair of forging hammers appeared in his grasp. He then lunged forward to his forging bench and raised his arms up into the air, quickly bringing his forging hammers down upon the 7 pieces of metal as if he were playing a musical instrument. If Senhua had been present to see this, he would have been stunned by what Tang Wuling was doing, which was forging 7 pieces of metal at once. Each type of metal had its own unique properties and characteristics, so the forging methods required were all completely different. This method of forging required outstanding calculation abilities, as well as extraordinary spiritual power and strength control. Senhua would perhaps be able to accomplish this in his mind, but there was no way he could actually do this in practice, and this was entirely due to the difference in power between the two. For individuals working in all occupations, it would benefit them immensely if they were also top-tier soul masters. The 7 pieces of metal were clanging rhythmically in different pitches and tones under Tang Wuling's forging hammers, and during the striking process, the rainbow lotus flame also adhered itself to the forging hammers. As the strikes continued to rain down, the 7 pieces of metal began to melt, but all to different extents. Tang Wuling's hammers were constantly striking them from different directions to improve their composition, and the rainbow lotus flames were also fluctuating in intensity at his behest, releasing just the right amount of heat for the situation. Within the span of just a few minutes, sweat was already beginning to appear on Tang Wuling's forehead. He was a hyper Douluo with mental manifestation level spiritual power, yet even he was beginning to display signs of strain. It was clear that forging in this manner was very taxing for him. Furthermore, he was only in the process of completing 100 refinement. He was already at a level where he could complete 1000 refinement with a single hammer blow, yet he was taking so long to complete 100 refinement, and that was a clear testament to how meticulous he was being. It was most likely the first time in history that anyone had ever attempted to forge 7 pieces of metal at once, and with his current skills, he was only able to complete 100 refinement. Upon completing 1000 refinements, the metals would undergo massive changes, requiring corresponding changes in his forging methods, and even his current spiritual power wouldn't be sufficient to allow him to keep up. As he continued his forging, he could clearly sense that the 7 pieces of metal were all constantly shrinking under his hammers. Each time the pieces of metal shrank, certain changes would take place within them, and even though their size was constantly diminishing, the metals were only glowing brighter and brighter. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face as he took a deep breath, and the 7 bursts of rainbow lotus flames on the 7 pieces of metal suddenly vanished back into his his palm at his behest. At this point, the pieces of metal were all as soft as balls of dough. Tang Wulin's eyes began to glow brightly, and golden light erupted from his body as he transferred the forging hammer in his right hand to his left hand, then made a grabbing motion toward the 7 pieces of metal. The surrounding air instantly congealed, and elements of all attributes instantly disappeared, as if the entire room had been sealed away. Even through her mecha, Ling Zichen was still struck by a strong sense of unease in the wake of this change. In contrast to when he had first used this technique, it had now virtually become second nature to Tang Wulin. This was his Dragon Emperor break. Everything around the 7 pieces of metal was instantly sealed, and that temporarily put all of the changes taking place in the pieces of metal on pause. Immediately thereafter, the 7 pieces of metal instantly came into contact with one another at his behest, and he returned one of his forging hammers to his right hand before sending them crashing toward the pieces of metal like a whirlwind. The disorder-splitting wind hammer technique of the Tang sect was being sped up countless times by him, and one deafening boom rang out after another on the forging bench. After conducting careful calculations, Ling Zichen discovered that the higher the number of metals used to forge an alloy, the more difficult the process would be, and the greater the amount of data that would have to be calculated. For 7 metals to be used at once, the amount of data that had to be calculated was astronomical, so it was virtually impossible to forge a 7-metal alloy at the heavenly refinement level for experience. As such, why not go the opposite way? That was the suggestion that Ling Zichen had given to Tang Wulin. As opposed to trying to fuse the metals into an alloy at their strongest state, why not fuse them at their weakest? The downside to this was that it would become extremely difficult to further refine the resulting alloy, but no matter how difficult that would be, the difficulty would only be in terms of energy expenditure for Tang Wulin. There would be far less data that had to be calculated by adopting this plan. As it turned out, her suggestion was very sound. During his prior experiments, Tang Wulin had already completed soul refinement on a 7-metal alloy, which meant that he had already created an alloy that could be used in a suit of 3-word battle armor, the first alloy of its kind in all of history. Tang Wulin had even attempted to forge this alloy into a suit of 3-word battle armor. Its power was still inferior to that of a suit of 4-word battle armor, but its explosiveness wasn't far off from a suit of 4-word battle armor, and of course, it was also lacking in sentience. At this moment, the 7 metals were gradually fusing together under his frenzied storm of hammer blows, and it was still quite easy to tell one metal from another. But as the metals began to integrate further with one another, they were starting to look more and more like a single metal. Furthermore, the rainbow lotus flame was ridding the metals of their impurities, making them softer and more supple as a result, thereby allowing Tang Wulin to better fuse them. One hammer blow rained down after another, and instead of injecting his soul power into the metals to improve their quality, Tang Wulin was using the purest and most basic forging techniques to integrate them. This was a slow process, and even a low-grade blacksmith wouldn't spend so long striking a piece of metal. However, Tang Wulin's hands remained steady, and he was constantly monitoring the power of his hammer blows as he continued unleashing the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique. Soul power was often able to trigger fundamental changes in metals, which was why he was able to complete 1000 refinement with a single hammer strike. However, without the injection of soul power, the process became purer. Thus, the hammers continued to fall, triggering one change after another. The 7 pieces of metal gradually fused as one, and its color was also changing as the forging continued. Meanwhile, Ling Zichen was waiting patiently off to the side. She knew that forging required time and had to be completed in a single unbroken session. Soon, he was already past 1000 hammer blows, but due to the caliber of the metal, there was no fundamental change. After a full 3 hours, 10,000 hammer blows were completed. Finally, the 7 metals had fused as one, turning into a special color. Back when the 7 pieces of metal were still independent of one another, they were each giving off their own radiance under the illumination of the rainbow lotus flame. However, now that they were fused together, their radiance seemed to have been concealed and was no longer being released. Thus, the piece of metal was left with a dull yellow color, but it was riddled with layer upon layer of fine patterns that resembled miniature ravines, and one could easily find themselves lost in the patterns if they were to look deep into them. Chapter 1733. Tang Wulin was still forging away tirelessly, and he could easily pick up the pace, but this was not the time to be pursuing maximal speed. He had to be slow and steady so he could feel how the metal was reacting to each and every hammer blow. Another 2 hours passed, and finally, the metal had turned from a dull yellow color into a faint golden color. Each of the 7 pieces of metal had originally had side lengths of around a foot, yet now, the 7 metals combined only had a side length of roughly a foot, which meant that they had been reduced to a seventh of their original size. Tang Wulin's clothes were already soaked with sweat, and even with his physical constitution and the recovery ability of the Golden Dragon King bloodline, he was on the verge of overexertion. Using the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique for such a long period of time was a massive test of stamina, even for him. All of a sudden, a strange buzzing sound rang out from the metal on the forging bench, and it began to release a scintillating radiance. Ling Zichen reflexively took a step back and raised the arms of her mecha to shield herself. The piece of metal was currently like a miniature sun, and it was releasing scorching light that even struck Tang Wulin with a slight scalding sensation. The light filled every single corner of the entire platform, illuminating everything within the protective barrier. Tang Wulin was ecstatic, and words failed to describe the emotions he was feeling right now. During his prior experiments, he had never been able to get a 7-metal alloy to undergo 1000 refinement on its own. In all those past instances, he had to use his soul power as a catalyst. Prior to commencing today, he had already made up his mind that he was going to make the metal undergo the change on its own no matter how difficult it was going to be to achieve that. He wanted to see just how much forging was required for a 7-metal alloy to undergo 1000 refinement without the involvement of soul power, and he was even more interested to see what kind of change would result from such a special 1000 refinement process. As it turned out, all of his efforts were worthwhile. In the past, the most successful 7-metal alloy 1000 refinement that Tang Wulin had completed had only resulted in a pillar of light that was close to 20 feet tall. However, this was completely different. The light being released by this piece of metal wasn't just extending upward as it normally did. Instead, it was radiating in all directions like the light of the sun. There was definitely a fundamental difference here. Tang Wulin didn't know exactly what the difference was, but he was still overjoyed. Such a drastic change could perhaps be a catalyst to success. Only after several minutes had passed did the light gradually fade, and Tang Wulin was surprised to discover that the 1000 refined alloy seemed to have become more transparent. Furthermore, the light radiating from it was fluctuating in brightness in a very rhythmic manner, as if it had learned to breathe. There was also a peculiar sense of life emanating from the alloy, which was also very unexpected as this was something that should only arise after spirit refinement or even soul refinement. Spirit refinement created life, while soul refinement bestowed intelligence. However, even though this was only a 1000 refined alloy, it was giving off a more potent aura of life energy than even any spirit refined metal that Tang Wulin had ever seen. Furthermore, he could clearly sense a close bloodline connection with this piece of metal, as if it were calling out to him. Tang Wulin slowly made his way over to the forging bench and set down his forging hammers before placing his right hand onto the piece of metal. He was immediately struck by a scorching sensation that was transmitted deep into his heart, following which he sensed a very pure and coolest consciousness, like that of an infant that had just awakened. Upon sensing Tang Wulin's touch, the surface of the piece of metal in contact with Tang Wulin's palm began to glow significantly brighter, even though it wasn't able to manipulate its own form like a heavenly refined metal. It was currently displaying characteristics congruent with the average soul refined metal. Having said that, it had been far more taxing for Tang Wulin to complete 1000 refinement on this piece of metal than normal soul refinement. Despite their similarities, there was no way that the average soul refined metal could compare with this alloy, as the latter had far more latent potential. Let me help you, all right? Tang Wulin asked in a gentle voice. The alloy emitted a faint buzzing sound, as if in response to Tang Wulin. Even Ling Zichen couldn't help but clench her fists upon seeing this. She knew that Tang Wulin was most likely going to be making an unprecedented breakthrough on this day. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face, and a look of unwavering confidence surfaced in his eyes as he picked up his forging hammers again. In that instant, all of his exhaustion seemed to have been wiped away, and he resumed his forging. Initially, the hammer strikes that he dealt were extremely light as he was trying to feel the changes that had taken place in the alloy through these strikes. However, as he familiarized himself with this alloy's properties, the hammer strikes grew heavier, and with each strike that was dealt, the metal would respond with a flash of light. In Tang Wulin's mind, it was as if the metal were absorbing his power, and during the forging process, it was working hard to grow up and evolve. This was an extremely wonderful feeling, and Tang Wulin slowly became immersed in it. This was not just forging, there was also communication taking place. The golden light grew brighter and brighter, gradually forming a light barrier that enshrouded both Tang Wulin and the piece of metal within it. Tang Wulin's hammer strikes were constantly varying in power, but he didn't pause even for a single moment. Meanwhile, the piece of metal continued to shrink, and as it did so, it began to glow even brighter, but its energy fluctuations were completely contained and subdued. Boom. After an indeterminate period of time had passed, Tang Wuling finally landed the last hammer strike, and all of a sudden, the piece of metal shattered before rising up into the air as a streak of golden light. It then seemed to let loose a loud buzz of elation before morphing into a living golden statue that was completely identical to Tang Wuling, except it was a miniature version of him. The statue was also holding a pair of forging hammers, and it was swinging the hammers in Tang Wuling's direction, as if to imitate him. This was the first time Tang Wuling had ever seen something like this, and he was a little dumbstruck. Right at this moment, fierce winds swept over the entire platform, and the abundance of elements in the air began to rapidly increase. A dense layer of rainbow tribulation clouds took shape almost instantly, heralding the arrival of the seven-colored elemental tribulation. What was quite perplexing to Tang Wuling was that he didn't even think that he had performed heavenly refinement. He had merely forged the metal while constantly communicating with it, and during the process, he had completely forgotten concepts such as spirit refinement, soul refinement, and heavenly refinement. Before he knew it, the piece of metal was already about to face a tribulation. This was incredible. Tang Wuling felt as if his eyes had been opened to a whole new way of forging. Was this what it felt like to forge with absolute focus? Only in this instant did Tang Wuling feel for the very first time that he had truly become a divine blacksmith. In the past, he had been able to succeed in heavenly refinement due to his unique set of advantages. However, on this occasion, he had attracted the most powerful elemental tribulation using the simplest of forging methods, and he finally felt enlightened, just like back when he had attained Spirit Essence. Chapter 1734. The soul power within his body abruptly began to churn, and he felt as if he had become completely submerged in scorching air currents. He had made a breakthrough in his soul power. He had made a breakthrough earlier after attaining Spirit Essence and returning to Shrek Academy, and now, he was making another breakthrough after truly becoming a divine blacksmith. The current Tang Wuling was now at rank 98 soul power, and he was racing toward the pinnacle at an inexplicable speed. However, he didn't have any spare mental capacity to examine the changes that had taken place within his own body. He was currently focused wholeheartedly on the piece of metal hovering in midair, and all he wanted at this moment was to help it transcend its tribulation. If he could do that successfully, then he would be completing heavenly refinement on a 7 metal alloy for the very first time. He took a step forward, bringing him directly in front of the piece of metal, then released his infernal lightning vine in preparation to withstand part of the lightning tribulation. However, the golden statue suddenly turned around and shook his head at Tang Wuling in a decisive manner. It was clear that it was telling Tang Wuling that it didn't need his help in facing the lightning tribulation. In Tang Wuling's past experience, all of the metals that he had completed heavenly refinement on had been overcome by fear in the face of their elemental tribulations. At that point, they still weren't able to shapeshift or move freely. Otherwise, Tang Wuling was certain that they would have flown around him and cowered behind him for protection. However, this piece of metal was displaying the complete opposite reaction, actively requesting Tang Wuling not to get involved, and this was completely unprecedented. Tang Wuling didn't hesitate and immediately took a few steps backward, seeing as the metal wanted to try and transcend this tribulation on its own. Then there was no reason to stop it. Rumble. The elemental tribulation made its first move, sending a bolt of lightning crashing down from above. The forging hammers in the golden statue's hands suddenly vanished, and in that instant, an astonishing scene transpired. The golden statue raised its right hand, and a dual-tipped spear appeared in its grasp. This was a miniature version of the golden dragon spear. At the same time, Tang Wuling was astonished to discover that the golden dragon spear within his body was nowhere to be found. What just happened? How was this piece of metal able to borrow his golden dragon spear? However, the most stunning events were still yet to come. As Tang Wuling continued to look on in an astonished manner, the golden statue thrust its golden dragon spear forward, releasing countless spear projections that ultimately fused as one. This was fury of the masses. Boom. Rainbow lightning surged along the golden dragon spear, crashing into the golden statue's body, causing it to shudder violently. However, it only took a split second for the rainbow lightning to be completely absorbed into its body. After that, the golden statue raised its head and gestured for more in a provocative display. As the lightning was absorbed into the golden statue's body, Tang Wuling was also struck by a numb sensation, as if he were the one who had been struck by the lightning instead. Boom. A second bolt of lightning fell, this one clearly more powerful than the first. Perhaps the tribulation clouds had been infuriated by the golden statue's provocative gesture, and it rained down 3 bolts of lightning in succession. The golden statue made no attempt to evade, unleashing one spear projection after another with its golden dragon spear to fight fire with fire. At the same time, a suit of battle armor that was identical to Tang Wuling's 3-word battle armor appeared over its body. Boom, boom, boom. The 3 consecutive lightning strikes were far more fearsome than the first one, and even though the golden statue had managed to withstand the barrage, it was sent flying down from above before crashing heavily onto the ground. Tang Wuling was also struck by a rush of dizziness and numbness. Didn't the metal indicate that it was going to transcend the tribulation on its own? Why was the impact being duplicated? Right at this moment, a loud clang rang out, and the golden statue sprang up into the air. After withstanding that barrage of 3 lightning strikes, its body was already glowing with extremely bright rainbow light. It seemed to have also been enraged by this, and it transferred the golden dragon spear into its left hand before raising its right hand upward. Immediately thereafter, what appeared to be a black hole appeared over its tiny palm. The 5 subsequent bolts of elemental lightning that fell from above were instantly torn apart, then forcibly devoured by the black hole as specks of rainbow light. This was Dragon Emperor Break. It was even capable of using the Dragon Emperor restriction techniques. This was basically a miniature and metallic version of Tang Wuling himself. Ling Zichen was also completely rooted to the spot, and she was even struck by the feeling that she was watching Tang Wuling's child in action. Boom. A string of rumbling thunderclaps rang out as the elemental tribulation intensified. What was even more terrifying was that a ball of rainbow lightning was quickly beginning to take shape up above. For the first time, the golden statue was struck by a hint of fear, and it tightened its grip around the golden dragon spear as its aura seemed to be undergoing a change, while the air around it began to twist and warp. The ball of lightning fell out of the sky like a shooting star, and as the golden statue gripped the golden dragon spear with both hands, everything in the surrounding area suddenly stood still, including even the ball of lightning for a split second. In the next instant, the golden dragon spear slashed through the air, instantly slicing the ball of lightning in half. Scintillating rainbow light gushed into the golden statue's body, and Tang Wuling shuddered violently off to the side, but it was a strangely exhilarating sensation. The golden statue was even capable of using his Dragon Emperor slash. After absorbing the ball of lightning, the rainbow light radiating from the golden statue's body had become extremely bright. All of a sudden, it pointed its golden dragon spear up at the heavens, and an aura of reckless abandon erupted forth as it flew up directly toward the lightning clouds as a streak of rainbow light. This was Tang Wuling's Dragon Emperor charge. A string of rumbling thunderclaps rang out up above, and the elemental tribulation seemed to have become even more enraged by the golden statue's provocation. A fearlessly unyielding will erupted out of the golden statue's body, causing even the tribulation clouds to dim slightly. Restrict heaven and earth. Dragon Emperor fight. This was one of the 2 new Dragon Emperor restriction techniques that Tang Wuling had created, and it was an extremely powerful auxiliary skill rather than one that had directly offensive ability. Tang Wuling could sense that his Dragon Emperor fight was already able to emulate roughly 1% of that star-wielding figure's aura, but just this 1% was already beyond the boundaries of the spirit domain realm. Above the spirit domain realm was the divine origin realm, which was a realm that was only attainable to the gods. As soon as Dragon Emperor fight was unleashed, even the rainbow tribulation clouds dimmed significantly. Tang Wuling had never had a chance to use this Dragon Emperor restriction technique in battle, but the golden statue was testing it instead. All of a sudden, everything turned dark, and it was as if heaven and earth had been flipped around as a terrifying aura spread through the air. The tribulation clouds in the sky suddenly felt as if they were on the verge of crumbling away, and right at this moment, Tang Wuling could sense that the infernal lightning vine within his body was absorbing the power of the lightning tribulation in an ecstatic frenzy. Everything suddenly seemed to have fallen into darkness and destruction, and the sudden change caused Ling Zichen to let loose an agonized cry. Even the defenses of her divine grade mecha were on the verge of being overwhelmed. Chapter 1735. Tang Wuling instantly positioned himself in front of Ling Zichen to shield her from the fearsome destructive power. In that instant, Tang Wuling could clearly sense that the energy in his soul core and dragon core, as well as his strength, were instantly sapped away in their entirety, but his body was deriving a peculiar sense of enjoyment from the nourishment of the rainbow elemental tribulation. Has it managed to use even my final Dragon Emperor restriction technique? Each of Tang Wuling's 5 Dragon Emperor restriction techniques had its own unique properties, and each successive technique was more formidable than the previous one. In particular, this 5th technique integrated almost all of his abilities and was essentially a kamikaze attack. Never did Tang Wuling think that the golden statue would be able to unleash such a technique. The technique was called Restrict the Universe, Dragon Emperor Annihilation. The darkness lingered for over 10 seconds before gradually dissipating, and the rainbow tribulation clouds faded alongside it. The golden statue had disappeared, and the golden dragon spear had also returned to Tang Wuling's body. The only thing thing left hovering up above was a piece of metal in the form of a right gauntlet. It was exactly identical to how Tang Wuling had envisioned his right gauntlet, and it was designed to fit over his right hand and forearm. The design was very streamlined and simplistic, and it had a golden base, but was giving off rainbow radiance. He had succeeded. He had truly succeeded. Tang Wuling was overcome by a myriad of emotions at the sight of this right gauntlet, and even his eyes were glowing brightly. Having expended countless time and effort, he had finally succeeded. He reflexively raised his right hand, and the right gauntlet immediately flew over to him before settling onto his right arm. An intense scorching sensation appeared, and upon sensing the intruder, Tang Wuling's three-word battle armor instantly surfaced. However, as soon as the existing right gauntlet came into contact with this piece of four-word battle armor, the former was immediately forcibly suppressed, then melted away to be devoured by the four-word gauntlet. The right gauntlet was a perfect fit, and Tang Wuling was immediately struck by an unprecedented sensation, as if his right forearm had become different from the rest of his body. This was a change in power. It was a complete evolution akin to ascension from mortality to godhood. The other parts of his suit of three-word battle armor let loose an anguish-ringing sound, then fell out of his body and clattered onto the ground amid a string of loud clangs. Tang Wuling's eyelids twitched slightly upon seeing this. Wasn't this piece of four-word battle armor far too territorial? It wasn't allowing the three-word battle armor to reside within his body. They're not worthy. A prideful message that was imbued with a hint of arrogance was transmitted into Tang Wuling's mind. Despite how haughty the message was, it was very convincing. Tang Wuling hurriedly turned his attention toward the gauntlet. Is it you that's communicating with me? That's right. You are me, and I am you. We are one. Thank you for creating me. By the way, the name you wanted to give me was Golden Dragon Moon Song, right? That's right. Tang Wuling had already decided the name for his suit of four-word battle armor, just as Gu Yuna had as well. They were going to be Golden Dragon Moon Song Tang Wuling and Silver Dragon Dancing Keeling Gu Yuna. This was Tang Wuling's four-word battle armor, the most powerful four-word battle armor in history. Tang Wuling asked, but don't I need to get soul circuits engraved onto you first? Soul circuits? What are those? I have no need for any such additions. I am a divine tool, and no mortal addition will enhance me in any way. Tang Wuling faltered slightly upon hearing this. You're a divine tool. That's right. I'm a divine tool, just like your golden dragon spear, except my material is inferior to it. But I have greater synergy with you. It hasn't become a part of you yet, but I have. Perhaps you can regard me as a clone of yours if you'd like. How is this thing so intelligent? Tang Wuling suddenly recalled that Ling Zichen was also present, and he turned to find her inspecting his gauntlet with a curious expression, upon which a wry smile appeared on his face. It looks like I won't be able to forge metals for anyone else using this method. A divine tool forged through absolute focus and dedication could only become a part of its creator. Perhaps this was an inherent restriction placed upon divine tools. Tang Wuling didn't know how to react to the gauntlet's disdain towards soul circuits, but at the same time, it had opened up a whole new world to him. A suit of divine caliber four-word battle armor would surely contribute to an exceptional foundation for an ascension to godhood in the future. At the Spirit Pagoda, Gu Yuna stood quietly in front of the window, peering into the distance. She had just come out of seclusion and learned about the Eternal Heaven incident. Through this window in her room, she was able to see the brand new Shrek city in the distance. The giant sea god's lake was like a massive nature sapphire under the sun. She could sense that he had developed further, and that he seemed to have made a new breakthrough. This was a connection akin to a bloodline tie. Perhaps his rapid improvement wasn't a bad thing. The doorbell sounded, and Gu Yuna withdrew her gaze before extending her right hand through the air, upon which the door opened on its own to reveal an ordinary-looking man wearing the uniform of a mid-tier Spirit Pagoda official. He entered the room before closing the door, then raised a hand to conjure up a layer of golden light that encompassed the entire room. Even the most advanced style tools wouldn't be able to detect anything happening inside the room now. The man extended a deep bow. My lord, how are the preparations coming along? Gu Yuna asked in an indifferent voice. The man replied, according to the current data we've gathered, over 45% of all soul masters that were above the soul sage level have entered the myriad beast plane at some point, and this number is only continuing to increase. Above the title Douluo level, the entrance rate is over 70%, and to them, the soul ring enhancements have a greater effect. The 10,000-year-old soul rings are also selling very well. Not only are they being purchased by high-grade soul masters, many wealthy families and merchants have also purchased 10,000-year-old soul rings to boost their overall power. Everything is progressing according to plan, and by our estimates, it should be another year at most before we can commence our operation. All right, I see. The man hesitated momentarily before continuing. My lord, with regard to the Golden Dragon King, you can go now. I have my own plans regarding this matter, Gu Yue said, cutting him off mid-sentence. The man raised his head to look at Gu Yuna with a hesitant look in his eyes, but in the end, he gave an affirmative response before departing. In the northernmost region of the continent, rumble, rumble. Dull rumbling reverberated incessantly in the distance, striking one with an unsettling sensation. The core area of the northernmost region was the coldest place on the entire Douluo continent. The temperatures here were below minus 50 degrees Celsius or 58 F all year round, and taking the wind chill factor into account, the perceived temperature could even plummet to below minus 100 degrees Celsius or 148 degrees Fahrenheit. At this moment, a string of bell rumbling was echoing incessantly deep within a massive cave with a diameter in excess of 1,000 meters. Beside the cave stood Ghost Emperor, who was giving off a dark green aura that contrasted starkly with the pristine white world around him. There was a sinister smile on his face as he murmured to himself, success is imminent. Ha ha, ha ha ha. Deranged cackling rang out across the world of snow and ice. Chapter 1736. The fact that Eternal Heaven had fallen into the hands of Shrek Academy and the Tang sector changed the political landscape of the entire continent. The Dou faction was enjoying a resurgence in the federal parliament and was beginning to match its Eagle faction counterpart. Molan had already officially become the leader of the Dou faction, and due to Chen Xinji's sudden resignation, an internal power struggle took place within the Eagle faction, resulting in a series of clashes before the next leader of the Sea God Legion was decided. As a result, the war that the Eagle faction was planning to wage against the other two continents was put on ice. As for punishing the Tang sector or Shrek Academy, that was entirely out of the question. Just the threat of Eternal Heaven alone had completely suppressed the Spirit Pagoda, and that wasn't even taking into account how many limit Douluo the two superpower organizations had. Eternal Heaven was a weapon that could easily destroy a city, and it was a trump card that everyone had to be wary of. Furthermore, with the reconstruction of Shrek City, Shrek Academy and the Tang sector were officially connected, and the new Shrek City had become one of the most hyped up places on the entire continent. Every plot of land in the new Shrek City had been bid up to astronomical prices, and a strict screening process had to be passed before one could move into the city. With the meteoric resurgence of Shrek Academy, Spirit Academy was being dealt a series of heavy blows. Shrek Academy had reclaimed its title as the #1 academy on the continent, and as a result, Spirit Academy's influence was naturally diminished to the point that it was virtually negligible. Perhaps as a result of these recent events, the Spirit Pagoda had gone completely silent. Business was still booming at the Myriad Beast Plane, but aside from that, the Spirit Pagoda wasn't making its presence felt at all, and none of its representatives in Parliament even spoke up about the Eternal Heaven incident. The incident was also kept strictly confidential by the Federation, but all those who were in the know were aware that Shrek Academy's resurgence was unavoidable, and that no one would be able to touch the Tang sect or Shrek Academy again. It seemed that Shrek Academy had returned to its former glory of night. The foundation of the current Shrek Academy still couldn't compare with that of the former Shrek Academy, which had many titled Douluo level teachers among its ranks, but with the inclusion of the Yuan and family and the Killing Douluo, as well as the sweeper in the form of Old Man Chen, Shrek Academy's current overall power was superior to even that of the Atlas Douluo's generation. The persistence and growth of Tang Wuling's generation naturally contributed to Shrek Academy's rise from the ashes in such a short time, but a more significant factor was the foundation that Shrek Academy had built up over countless years. There were countless Shrek Academy alumni such as Guan Yue spread across the entire continent, and all of them were assisting the Shrek Academy rebuild in any way that they could. A foundation laid over the course of 20,000 years certainly couldn't be wiped out in a single night. At this moment, the entire Douluo continent had become extremely peaceful and harmonious. There was only one piece of news that sent a massive stir running through the entire Soul Master world, which was that Tang Wuling had been confirmed to be a divine blacksmith. Many parties, including the Blacksmith Association, had already verified this, making Tang Wuling, the second divine blacksmith on the continent after Zhenhua, released in conjunction with this announcement was a statement declaring Zhenhua's retirement due to health reasons. In the future, he was going to focus his attention mainly on mentoring the next generation of blacksmiths. This meant that Tang Wuling was the only person on the continent capable of heavenly refinement and forging forward battle armor, making him an extremely important figure in the entire Soulmaster world. Even at its absolute peak, Shrek Academy had never had a divine blacksmith among its ranks. Now that the situation has stabilized and we have your support, my life has been made a lot easier. The neutral faction has completely sided with us now, and I think you should consider obtaining a few seats in the federal parliament for Shrek Academy. Molan suggested as she took a sip of her tea. She had paid a visit to Shrek Academy to see Tang Wuling and tell him about the latest developments in the federal parliament. Tang Wuling replied, I won't do that. Shrek Academy wasn't involved in the parliament in the past, and things will stay that way. Shrek Academy has always maintained absolute neutrality. I can't just break that rule on a whim. Molan sighed. Sometimes, it's important to hold power in your hands. There are many good people in this world, but just as many rotten apples. The Shrek Academy bombing took place in large part due to the fact that the academy didn't hold enough power. Tang Wuling replied, that may be true, but at the end of the day, Shrek Academy is only an academy. If we're going to be actively exerting influence upon the political sphere, then the academy will no longer be pure. The bombing was a major disaster for Shrek Academy, but it also served as a reminder that we must become more powerful to ensure that nothing similar will happen again. We'll always be supporting the neutral faction and Dou faction. Isn't that enough? Are you going to exact revenge then? This was the main question that Molan had for Tang Wuling. It was clear to everyone that the Spirit Pagoda had to have been involved in the Shrek City bombing. The Holy Spirit cult was still lurking in the shadows, yet the Spirit Pagoda was a clear target that was out in the open. Of course, Molan wanted nothing more than to maintain the current peace on the continent, but could she really expect Shrek Academy to refrain from exacting revenge? If Shrek Academy would make a move against the Spirit Pagoda, then a horrific conflict would surely follow. The Spirit Pagoda had amassed enormous wealth and gained the support of countless powerful soul masters. If a conflict were to arise between the two superpower organizations, then the peace would be broken again, and that was not something that Molan wanted to see. Tang Wuling looked into Molan's eyes with a serious expression and asked, do you think we should seek revenge? Molan faltered slightly upon hearing this. She didn't think that Tang Wuling would turn the question back onto her, and she didn't know how to reply. Tang Wuling smiled and said, there's no need for you to worry about this. Something simply must be done. Shrek Academy and the Tang sect have been passive for so long as we were biding our time in search for an opportunity to exact our revenge. How could they not seek revenge? Atlas Douluo Yanming, Silver Moon Douluo Kai Yuya, Scarlet Dragon Douluo Chuoshi, Blazing Dragon Douluo Feng Wuyu, one familiar name after another had appeared in Tang Wuling's mind on countless occasions. They had all been pillars of Shrek Academy at one point, yet they had all given up their lives to protect the students during that disaster. If it weren't for their sacrifices, the younger generation of Shrek Academy would have been entirely wiped out, and there would have been no chance for a resurgence. Would any of the current teachers of Shrek Academy simply agree to let the Spirit Pagoda off the hook? Similarly, many familiar names in the Tang sect, including the past Hall Masters and the Brothers of the Battle Hall, had also been destroyed alongside the Tang sect headquarters. Who was the perpetrator of all this? The Holy Spirit cult. How could they possibly have accomplished this alone? How did they manage to obtain those two Godslayer missiles? It was clear that the Spirit Pagoda was just as at fault as the Holy Spirit cult. The Spirit Pagoda had tried to thwart Shrek Academy's revival every step of the way, and now that Shrek Academy had finally truly risen up again, it was time for revenge. Chapter 1737. As Molan departed, she did so in a forlorn manner. She wasn't able to complete her objective in the end. In reality, she had already anticipated that her plight would most likely be a futile one. This was a massive blood feud, and regardless of how generous Shrek Academy and the Tang sect were, it was impossible to expect them to just let bygones be bygones. If it weren't for the sake of the continent's stability, they would have commenced their revenge operation long ago. As the current leader of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, Tang Wuling naturally couldn't let things slide just because that was the outcome that Molan wanted to see. He was merely still waiting for a more perfect opportunity. This opportunity wasn't going to come from the outside world. It was going to come from Shrek Academy itself. The most fearsome thing about Shrek Academy wasn't its current power. Instead, it was the Academy's potential for future growth. With the divine blacksmith in the form of Tang Wuling present, Shrek's 7 monsters and all of the Academy's other powerful beings could be armed to the teeth. Even the Spirit Pagoda couldn't imagine just how much aptitude he had for heavenly refinement and how quickly he was able to produce divine grade metals. In fact, aside from the core circles in the Shrek Academy and the Tang sect, no one knew just how quickly Tang Wuling was able to churn out battle armor. The soul masters of the outside world would only approximate his rate of forging according to what Zhenhua had been capable of in the past, but compared with Zhenhua, Tang Wuling's production was far more staggering. He was waiting for all of his friends to become titled Douluos with full suits of forward battle armor. Once that happened, it would be time for revenge. They couldn't find the Holy Spirit cult for now, but the Spirit Pagoda couldn't go anywhere. Shrek Academy couldn't afford to be dealt another heavy blow, so unless he had absolute confidence, Tang Wuling wasn't going to do anything rash. Thus, he had only told Molan that Shrek Academy wasn't going to be doing anything in the next 6 months, thereby giving the continent a chance to settle and recover. However, he couldn't make any guarantees beyond that. Tang Wuling's suit of forward battle armor still wasn't complete. It was simply far too taxing to complete heavenly refinement of the divine caliber, and he required at least a week to recover after forging each piece of battle armor for himself. During this time, he would forge metals required for everyone else's suits of forward battle armor. After making that breakthrough, Tang Wuling's understanding of heavenly refinement had reached a new level, and his proficiency had improved significantly as a result. His speed hadn't increased, but there was a clear improvement in quality, so much so that he had decided to upgrade the pieces of forward battle armor that he had already forged for his friends to further improve their power. At the Spirit Pagoda, Kaiangyu Dongfang was sitting on the main seat with a serious expression. To his left sat Heavenly Phoenix Douluo Len Yaoshu, while Silver Dragon Douluo Gu Yuna sat to his right. Indeed, Gu Yuna's current status in the Spirit Pagoda was already equal to that of the Heavenly Phoenix Douluo. Ever since Kaiangyu Dongfang came under the impression that she had already had physical relations with his grandson, any doubts that he had harbored toward her had been erased, and he had promoted her to her current position despite strong opposition. In return, Gu Yuna was managing the myriad beast planes splendidly with her outstanding power and intelligence. It could be said that during the past few months, the only thing that could improve Kaiangyu Dongfang's mood slightly was the enormous revenue being generated by the myriad beast plane. Even so, he was still constantly in a foul mood. In addition to Len Yaoshu and Gu Yuna, there were a handful of other people present, all of whom were at least at the hyper Douluo level and made up the true core of the Spirit Pagoda. Kaiangyu Dongfang had already been seated in silence for a few minutes without saying anything. No one knew what the main subject of this meeting was going to be, but it was obvious that it had something to do with Shrek Academy. It wasn't a secret among this core circle that the two limit Douluos of the Tang sect had come to threaten the Spirit Pagoda headquarters with eternal heaven, and that was a massive disgrace for the Spirit Pagoda. After returning from the Battle God Hall, Kaiangyu Daiding had thrown a massive tantrum and punished a lot of people in the headquarters, but that didn't change anything. The fact of the matter was that eternal heaven had fallen into the hands of the Tang sect, and it was hanging above the Spirit Pagoda's head like a sharp sword. No one knew if or when the sword was going to fall. This was a Godslayer missile that was more powerful than the other two combined. It was essentially a devastating disaster encapsulated within a metallic vessel. During the past month, Kaiangyu Dongfang had already received over 20 applications from high-ranking members of the Spirit Pagoda, requesting to be moved to another branch. Among the people present, over a third of them had handed in such applications. Regardless of how overbearing the Kaiangyu family was, they couldn't enforce an order for all of the high-ranking members to remain in the headquarters. Otherwise, internal turmoil would be sure to result. The Kaiangyu family was a very powerful family, but it wasn't an omnipotent power in the Spirit Pagoda. As such, Kaiangyu Dongfang was forced to hold this meeting. Otherwise, if internal conflict were to arise, then that could spell the beginning of the end for the Spirit Pagoda. In reality, he wasn't directly responsible for the seizing of eternal heaven by the Tang sect, but the internal board of the Spirit Pagoda didn't see it that way, and many dissenting voices had already arisen. The mastermind behind the Spirit Pagoda's involvement in the Shrek City bombing had been the Kaiangyu family, and it was now being held against them. If it weren't for the fear everyone held toward the two limit Douluo of the Kaiangyu family, they would have most likely already been overthrown. Chairman, why have you gathered everyone here today? Len Yaoshu finally broke the silence. She knew full well why everyone had been summoned to attend this meeting, but she still had to ask. In reality, she and Kaiangyu Dongfang didn't belong to the same branch. She was representing another branch within the Spirit Pagoda. Of course, her branch wasn't anywhere near as powerful as the Kaiangyu family. Kaiangyu Dongfang took a glance at her before also breaking his silence. Recently, there's been a lot of unrest within our Spirit Pagoda. I know what's been happening, and I know what everyone is worried about. In fact, we share the same concerns. All of you are wondering when Shrek Academy and the Tang sect will officially exact their revenge on us. else, right? The entire room fell completely silent, and even a pin drop would be clearly audible in this setting. Everyone's eyes were focused on Kyangu Dongfang, and they were surprised that he was being so straightforward about this. After a brief silence, Kyangu Dongfang continued, "It's true that our conflict with the Tang sect and Shrek Academy is beyond resolution, and things will boil over eventually. The later we act, the more detrimental the situation will become for us. I'm sure all of you are of the same opinion, right?" Leng Yaoshu's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "Are you criticizing all of us, Chairman?" Her discontent toward Kyangu Dongfang was already at a boiling point, and it had been ever since the Shrek City bombing. Kyangu Dongfang took a cold glance at her, and said, "Ever since the development of soul technology began to pick up steam on the Douluo continent, we no longer had to fear the soul beasts. As such, the only enemy of humanity is humanity itself. Similarly, the advancements in soul technology have rendered soul masters far more vulnerable than they had once been. Otherwise, the Atlas Douluo wouldn't have perished during the bombing." Leng Yaoshu's expression changed noticeably upon hearing this, and her hands clenched up into tight fists below the table. She knew that Kyangu Dongfang was intentionally pouring salt into her wounds, but she couldn't help but be enraged by his words. Kyangu Dongfang turned his gaze away from her, and continued, "In this world, the power of the individual is no longer absolute. What's truly formidable is the power of technology and wealth, and our Spirit Pagoda was able to become the #1 organization on the continent precisely because of our astronomic wealth. Nana, read out the statistics for everyone." Chapter 1738. Yu Yuna sat up straighter and did as she was instructed. "Yes, Chairman. Currently, the Myriad Beast plane is operating smoothly, and its entry can be granted in exchange for money, uncommon metals, and other items of value. During the past year, the Myriad Beast plane has earned the Spirit Pagoda over 30% more revenue than traditional soul spirit sales, becoming our largest source of revenue. Part of this revenue and the uncommon metals have been used for soul technology research and development, while the rest have been used to purchase required strategic supplies." She paused here momentarily before turning to Kyangu Dongfang with an inquisitive expression. Leng Yaoshu's expression had turned to one of bewilderment upon hearing this. Even she wasn't aware of these statistics. She had asked Yu Yuna about this in the past, but her reply at the time hadn't been anywhere near as clear as this. However, she was now providing these statistics at Kyangu Dongfang's behest, and Leng Yaoshu knew that this meant that her disciple had completely defected over to Kyangu Dongfang's side. Kyangu Dongfang nodded, and prompted, "Some things need to be revealed. Otherwise, everyone will think that I'm an incompetent chairman. All of the preparatory measures we've taken were implemented in the case of extreme situations." Yu Yuna nodded in response, then continued, "These strategic supplies include 100 ninth-grade soul missiles, 300 8th-grade soul missiles, 3 soul formation defense systems fit for use even in outer space and were initially designed by the Federation specifically for space exploration." The contents of the list were staggering to the higher-ups of the Spirit Pagoda present. One had to realize that any ninth-grade soul missile possessed power equivalent to a full-force attack from a tidal Douluo. Even the Sea God Legion only had 10 ninth-grade soul missiles, and that was already the maximum quota allocated by the Federation. Never had such a massive number of ninth-grade soul missiles been accumulated by a single entity, and it would have been sure to have cost an astronomical sum. Yu Yuna continued, "We've conducted detailed analysis of the power of eternal heaven, and even though we don't know how much power its core would release during its explosion, the 3 soul formation defense systems will give us at least 3 minutes of safety during a potential explosion, which is enough time to do a lot of things. The Spirit Pagoda headquarters isn't lacking in emergency escape equipment, and 3 minutes is enough to evacuate over 10 times." A cold light appeared in Kyangu Dongfang's eyes as he took over from Yu Yuna. "Those 3 defense systems are currently installed in the headquarters, and I dare say that there's no place safer on the Douluo continent. Now, if anyone still wants to transfer to a different branch, you can state your intentions now, and I'll approve right away." An almighty aura erupted out of his body, completely wiping away his depressed demeanor and replacing it with unspeakable domineering might. Everyone fell completely silent, including Leng Yaoshu. None of them had imagined that Kyangu Dongfang would have set up so much in the shadows. The amount of money required for all of this was undoubtedly extremely staggering, but no one could criticize him for being wasteful. In spite of recent events, everyone present had to admit that the Spirit Pagoda had developed rapidly ever since Kyangu Dongfang had taken the helm, especially when it came to revenue. The creation of 10,000-year-old soul spirits had already drastically boosted the revenue being generated by the Spirit Pagoda, and with the Myriad Beast plane thrown into the mix, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that over 80% of the Spirit Pagoda's revenue had been generated after Kyangu Dongfang had become the chairman. With the wealth that he had generated, he had purchased resources and strategic weapons to protect the Spirit Pagoda and intimidate its enemies. Kyangu Dongfang looked around at everyone present, and upon seeing that no one was raising any objections, he nodded in a pleased manner. "From now on, I don't want to hear about anyone sowing fear and dissension among our ranks. As for the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, if they dare to come, then we'll wait for them. If they're smart and know what's good for themselves, they'll lie low and develop as normal. Even if they have a Godslayer missile, we're not unable to retaliate. In this day and age, wealth ranks above all else, and there's no way that the Tang sect and Shrek Academy can compare with us in this respect. So what if they have a few talented young people? They pose no threat to us given the nature of the current era. Taking everything into account, I have no idea what all of you are so concerned about." That's it, meeting over. After that, Kyangu Dongfang slammed palm down onto the table before departing. Yu Yuna hurriedly stood up and followed along behind him. In the wake of their departure, the room remained completely silent. The statistics that had just been rattled off had truly astonished everyone, and they had to admit that Kyangu Dongfang had successfully intimidated them. As for his statement that wealth trumped all else, at the very least, no one could rebut it for now. Leng Yaoshu's fists were tightly clenched, and she remained seated in the conference hall for a long time. She had been very depressed ever since Yang Ming's death, and she had placed very high hopes in Yu Yuna. In her eyes, Yu Yuna was the future. However, Yu Yuna had defected over to Kyangu Dongfang, thereby snuffing out the hope in her heart, leaving her at a loss for what to do. If it weren't for lack of courage and the fact that Yang Ming had never loved her, perhaps she would have already followed him to the afterlife. Only after Kyangu Dongfang returned to his room did he allow himself to exhale and relax. He was finally feeling more like himself after that domineering display. Yu Yuna followed him into the room before closing the door, then activated the sound isolation system. "You must think I took quite a risk back there, right?" Kyangu Dongfang asked as he looked out the window. Yu Yuna replied, "A little. Out of the statistics we presented, only less than 20% have actually been prepared. If someone decides to verify our claims, there could be some issues. After all, everything else will be ready soon, but it'll take a long time to complete the production of the ninth-grade soul missiles." Kyangu Dongfang asked, "How long will it take for the 3 soul formation defense systems to be complete?" Yu Yuna replied, "It'll take another 3 months or so, and according to our calculations, even once the 3 systems are in place, they still won't even be able to withstand Eternal Heaven's explosion for a minute. On top of that, if issues were to arise, a sufficient number of soul masters will be required to support the systems." Kyangu Dongfang said, "That's why I claimed a 3-minute safety period. All of these people are considering jumping ship at the first sign of danger. If I don't give them some hope, then none of them will be willing to stay behind and protect our headquarters. If worst comes to worst, then some sacrifices will need to be made." Yu Yuna hesitated momentarily before nodding in response. "I understand." Kyangu Dongfang turned around and cast a gentle gaze toward her. "It's a good thing you've been around to help me these past few days. Our top priority now is to maintain the stable operation of the Myriad Beast plane. The Myriad Beast plane is entirely in our grasp and not something that anyone else can stake a claim on. Regardless of how discontent they are toward me, they won't actually go and verify those statistics so long as the Myriad Beast plane continues to generate these enormous sums of revenue. As such, the biggest thing you can do to help me is to ensure the profitability of the Myriad Beast plane. Rest assured, grandfather, there won't be any issues over at the Myriad Beast plane. I trust you. You can call upon any of the personnel you need to ensure that nothing goes wrong with the Myriad Beast plane. And when necessary, you can offer some discounts and promotions. We need to amass wealth as quickly as possible right now. The 109th grade soul missiles isn't just an empty promise. I have to make it come into fruition to ensure that we have sufficient ability to retaliate. If the Tang sect and Shrek Academy really do dare to make a move against us, then we'll bring them down with us." Yu Yuna nodded once again before asking, "Do you have any other instructions, grandfather?" A faint smile finally appeared on Kyangu Dongfang's face, and he replied, "That's all for now. You can go. Sorry to make you have to work so hard. Santing has already complained to me many times that he hasn't seen you in a long time due to your duties at the Myriad Beast plane. Regardless of how busy work is, don't let it affect your relationship. After today, our Spirit Pagoda will have temporary internal stability, so you can rest for a few days. Thank you for your concern, grandfather. Rest assured, I'll speak to Santing. This is the time when you need our efforts most, so I have to continue to work hard." Kyangu Dongfang chuckled, "Don't work too hard. I'm very much looking forward to having a great grandson, so you and Santing should arrange a wedding once things settle down." Chapter 1739. Yuna blushed as she lowered her head. I'll be going now, grandfather. Go on. Following Yuna's departure, a grim look reappeared on Kyangu Dongfang's face. Were 109th grade soul missiles really enough? With the powerful disruption system set up within Shrek City, it was impossible to see into it from afar, and he could only just barely make out the sea gods like from the Spirit Pagoda headquarters. He was far too familiar with Shrek Academy, perhaps due to the fact that they were enemies. Shrek Academy was a neutral entity, but throughout the course of history, it had played an instrumental role in influencing many of the important decisions that had shaped the continent. Each generation of Shrek 7 monsters had been a force to be reckoned with, and Shrek City was the symbol of Shrek Academy. There was no way they would be willing to let things slide in the wake of the city's destruction. In reality, he wasn't concerned about Shrek Academy using Eternal Heaven, as he knew that Shrek Academy wouldn't be willing to risk innocent lives. However, it was only a matter of time before Shrek Academy and the Tang sect sought revenge against the Kyangu family. With that in mind, he knew that he had to seize the initiative. Once all 109th grade soul missiles were ready, he would perhaps have to raise Shrek City to the ground again at all costs. A vicious look appeared in Kyangu Dongfang's eyes as this thought sprang into his mind. Right at this moment, his soul communicator suddenly began to ring, and as he looked at the number being displayed, his pupils instantly contracted slightly. He accepted the call, then said in a cold voice, "So you're finally willing to contact me? Oh, did you miss me?" As soon as the voice replied from the other end, "What do you think? I did everything I could to help you, yet you disappeared on me, right when I needed your services most." Kyangu Dongfang said in an enraged voice, "We were merely helping one another in the face of a common enemy. Kyangu Dongfang, my old friend, I have some fantastic news for you." The voice on the other end was still sinister and unpleasant, but it had adopted a very enthusiastic tone, creating an uncomfortable contrast. Kyangu Dongfang's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. Good news. What good news could you possibly have for me? We've created an opportunity for world domination. Wouldn't you say that's good news? World domination? What have you done? A chill ran down Kyangu Dongfang's spine as he spoke, and a sense of foreboding suddenly welled up in his heart. Both he and Shrek Academy seemed to have forgotten about the Holy Spirit cult during this period where it had remained inactive. There was no way that the Holy Spirit cult would have disbanded or had a change of heart. So what exactly had they been doing all this time? Those people had no morals and relished destruction, making them extremely dangerous. They wanted nothing better than to kill all of the living beings on the entire Douluo continent so they could enhance themselves through deathly energy. Kyangu Dongfang knew that cooperating with the Holy Spirit cult would well be a double-edged sword, but he harbored far too much resentment and hatred toward Shrek Academy for that to stop him. He knew that if he couldn't repress Shrek Academy and the Tang sect, the Spirit Pagoda would never be able to become the #1 organization on the continent, which was why he had stooped to working with the Holy Spirit cult. You'll know everything very soon. What you have to consider now is whether you want to join us. This is a limited time opportunity, and I can tell you that nothing will be able to stop us. The Douluo continent is destined to be ours. If you're willing to represent the Spirit Pagoda and submit to our rule, then things will progress a bit more quickly. Submit to your rule? Am I hearing this right? Have you gone insane? Kyangu Dongfang was furious. The Spirit Pagoda was a legitimate organization. He could use the Holy Spirit cult, but he couldn't afford to actually be lumped together with them. As long as the dealings taking place under the table were sufficiently concealed, perhaps no one would be able to accuse them of anything. But if they were to openly support the Holy Spirit cult, the Kyangu family would immediately be overthrown by the board of the Spirit Pagoda. That's quite a pity. However, if you choose to become our enemy, then you'll be sure to regret it. When that time comes, you won't even be able to join us if you begged. Ha ha ha. The voice on the other end of the line burst into raucous laughter that was extremely unpleasant to the ears and filled with unadulterated triumph. Kyangu Dongfang almost tore his soul communicator into pieces, but he knew that he had to remain calm and gather more information. He took a deep breath to forcibly repress his fury, then asked, "What did you do, Ghost Emperor? At the end of the day, we did work together in the past, so shouldn't you at least tell me what's happened so that we can prepare for what's coming? Future collaboration isn't out of the question, but you have to show me some sincerity first." Ghost Emperor chuckled. "There's no need for that. It doesn't matter whether we have you or not. I gave you this opportunity precisely because we had worked together in the past, but seeing as you're unwilling to submit to us, then you can go die." After that, the call was abruptly cut off. Kyangu Dongfang faltered slightly before he was finally overcome with rage and smashed his soul communicator into pieces. Those bastards. What the hell have they done? The unknown was always the most terrifying thing, and having interacted with Ghost Emperor on many past occasions, Kyangu Dongfang knew full well that he was a complete and utter madman. There was a sovereign above the two emperors of the Holy Spirit cult, but in reality, Ghost Emperor was the one in charge. Demon Sovereign of the Holy Spirit cult had virtually never been seen before. At the very least, Kyangu Dongfang had never met him, and he had only rumors that Demon Sovereign was a being who was infinitely approaching godhood. Equivalent in rank to Ghost Emperor was Infernal Emperor, otherwise known as Infernal King Douluo Harissa, but virtually completely uninvolved in the operation of the Holy Spirit Douluo. His sole pursuit was to be able to attain godhood. It didn't matter to him how he achieved this. The four heavenly monarchs answered directly to Ghost Emperor, as did the countless other powerful beings of the Holy Spirit cult. All of them had remained dormant for several years. What exactly had they done during this time? Despite how familiar Kyangu Dongfang was with them, he couldn't think of any possibilities. In any case, they were definitely up to no good, and he had to take some precautionary measures. He believed that the Holy Spirit cult wouldn't directly target the Spirit Pagoda, but he still had to fear them due to their love for destruction and slaughter. What was most troubling to Kyangu Dongfang was that he had no idea where the Holy Spirit cult could be. In the northernmost region of the continent. After ending the call, Ghost Emperor chortled for a while longer before cackling to himself. Kyangu Dongfang, gee, you think you have the right to work with me as equals? Tremble before me, mortals. Very soon, this entire world will become ours. Let the power of death come to us quickly. I've been waiting for this moment for far too long already. A figure arrived silently behind him, and the figure seemed to be completely concealed within darkness, making it impossible to make out their features. Ghost Emperor, he greeted in a respectful voice. How is Demon Sovereign, Blood Demon? Ghost Emperor asked. Demon Sovereign has already awakened and is instructing you to see him. We should be able to begin soon. Blood Demon replied in a voice that was filled with excitement. Chapter 1740. Fantastic. We've all been waiting for this moment for far too long already. No one is going to be able to stop us this time. He leapt into the deep pit behind him as he spoke, descending in free fall for several kilometers before eerie green flames ignited around his body to slow his momentum, allowing for a composed landing. Dark purple light was currently radiating from the ground beneath his feet, and it was extremely faint, providing a magical atmosphere. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that those were a series of soul formations, and what was quite harrowing was that those formations contained a purplish black liquid that was giving off a rank odor. The liquid was congealed blood, and there was enough of it to fill all of the formations in this giant pit, which had a diameter of over a kilometer. There was no wind here, but a sinister aura seemed to be constantly spreading through the area. At the very center of the giant pit stood a 5-level altar, at the top of which sat a person. The person's body was concealed within a large black cloak, and there was barely any light in this underground world, so one could easily miss her if they weren't looking carefully. Her head was slightly lowered, and there were faint black currents swirling around her. Even though she was nearly seated on the spot, it was as if she were the core of the universe. Ghost Emperor hurriedly rushed forward before extending a bow toward the altar. Demon Sovereign, everything is ready, and we're awaiting further instruction from you. Good. A melodious voice rang out in response, but in the next instant, the voice echoed throughout the entire space like a tsunami wave, sweeping up a string of air currents that surged out of the pit like a tornado. Ghost Emperor's expression remained unchanged, and he waited patiently in silence. You can begin. This world once ruined me, so it's time for me to ruin this world. Her body slowly levitated into midair as she spoke, and she straightened her legs as she rose to a standing position. Beneath the black cloak, the outline of a tall and slender body could be seen, but it was impossible to see any of her facial features. There was most likely no one who could have guessed that the most powerful being of the Holy Spirit cult would be a woman. She slowly raised her hands up from her sides, revealing her hands to be riddled with strange dark purple demonic patterns. Bright purple light began to glow from her hands, and she slowly chanted, I borrow the power of the sky to seal the heavens, and I borrow the power of the earth to connect with destruction. As she chanted, the giant formation beneath her feet began to rapidly spread into the distance with the altar at its center, transforming into countless dark purple projections. The entire underground world seemed to have sprung to life, and the ghastly howls of countless malicious spirits reverberated through the entire underground world. Ghost Emperor and Demon Sovereign were the only people present here, and 9 dark green skulls emerged emerged from Ghost Emperor's body before revolving around him, chomping and devouring all of the malicious spirits that were attempting to attack him. Meanwhile, Ghost Emperor stood still on the spot with a blissful expression. This was the world that he loved the most. The earth began to rumble, and a series of halos appeared on the altar beneath Demon Sovereign's feet. There were 7 halos, each of which was a color of the rainbow, but they were masked under a layer of darkness. The sky directly above the giant pit suddenly darkened, and it was as if an independent world had been created here. Right at this moment, a huge pillar of dark purple light erupted out of the pit directly into the heavens. A deranged look appeared in Ghost Emperor's eyes. With the blood of 100,000 people as a sacrifice in Demon Sovereign's power, today is the day that we welcome a new world order. From this moment forth, the mighty Demon Sovereign has become a god and now possesses the power of a god. Oh great Demon Sovereign, lead us to the future, to the path that'll destroy this entire world. That's right, it's time to open up the path to destroy this world. Demon Sovereign declared. It's a pity that you're no longer here, Tang San. Otherwise, I'd be sure to tear you to countless shreds to avenge my husband. The humans that you protected will all perish as part of my revenge, and I'm going to send this entire world to join my husband in the afterlife. I really hope you'll come back someday. I wonder what your reaction will be when you see all of this. Ha 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 ha. Rumble, rumble. The entire world of snow and ice was trembling, and massive ice shelves began to collapse as a series of rifts began to appear deep within the giant pit, releasing a terrifying aura. At Shrek Academy, Tang Wuling stretched lazily as an excited smile appeared on his face. He had finally completed another piece of battle armor for himself. He could clearly feel that with each piece of Golden Dragon Moon Song battle armor he completed, his power would be enhanced dramatically. However, the remaining pieces of battle armor were quite large, thereby increasing the difficulty of the forging process. And for some of the most difficult pieces, he would perhaps be unable to complete one even over a span of 2 weeks. Half a year had passed since Eternal Heaven had been captured, and during this time, Shrek Academy had been developing in a steady and peaceful manner. Aside from Tang Wuling, all of Shrek's 7 monsters had gone into seclusion at one point or another. Yi Xingling was consolidating her sword essence. Yuan and Yui was working on improving the cohesion between her 2 martial souls, and Yue's Hangyu and Shishi preparing for tidal Douluo breakthroughs. Shu Lizzie had gone to the 7 Saint Paradise to better experience the powers of life and destruction, while Shu Xiaoyao was cultivating on the stargazing platform. Ever since she had unveiled her powers as the number control system soul master under the starry heavens, she had been pushing herself even harder than before. All of their suits of 4-word battle armor had been complete during the past half a year, and Tang Wuling's Golden Dragon Moon Song was also only missing a very small portion. It was time. Tang Wuling changed into a set of vintage robes and strode out of his forging workshop. The robe belonged to the Sea God's Pavilion Master, and only during Sea God's Pavilion meetings did he need to wear it. The robe was of a dark green color with gold embroidery, and on the chest was a golden trident symbol to commemorate the leader of the first generation of Shrek's 7 monsters and the founder of the Tang sect, Sea God Tang San. He was the one that the Sea God's Pavilion had been named after. The past Sea God's Pavilion had been destroyed, and the current Sea God's Pavilion was set up in an area not far away from the main school building beside the Sea God's Lake. It had been constructed in the exact same style as the previous one, but it was missing the ancient golden tree. The tree of life had constantly been growing at a slow rate in the Sea God's Lake, and the lake was already teeming with life. The deathly energy had all been sucked away by the 7 Saint Paradise, and the ecosystem was completely balanced. The seeds of the 7 immortal plants were also under the lake, and they had sprouted around the tree of life. Along with the tree of life, they were growing by absorbing the life energy present in the air in the Sea God's Lake. However, their rate of growth was still very slow, and it would take them a long time to truly grow to maturity. Upon arriving at the Sea God's Pavilion, Shrek's 6 monsters were already present, and all of them were raring to go. As Tang Wuling strode into the room, everyone stood up in unison. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.